Hi, I'm Abby. I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. I totally didn't forget to press record the first time at all. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about albums that I love. If you're not into the whole 20-minute deep dive episode kind of thing, that's okay. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds, both here and on my Instagram. This week we're talking about LA Woman by The Doors. Congrats to those who guessed it. And you might be wondering, Abby, what the hell are you wearing? And that is a very valid question. Right now, I am dressed as the LA women themselves, the groupies. I love groupie fashion. All of my more outlandish style moments come from the groupies and the GTOs. I've referenced Miss Pamela multiple times. I even wore my replica of her Foxy Lady dress on this channel. And right now, this whole situation is a reference to Baron Wolman's photographs of groupies for Rolling Stone magazine in 1969. I love those photographs. I'm doing an LA Woman episode, so what better excuse to dress as the LA women themselves than right now? I got my scarf, I got my clown blouse, I got my feathers, and I'm ready to fucking party. Okay, back to the record. Let's take this out of the plastic. My copy is a repress. The original was a die cutout sleeve. Mine clearly doesn't have this. This maroon and gold cover was designed by Carl Kosick and photographed by Wendell Hammack. On the back, we have a super simple design, just text with the track listing and the personnel, the Elektra Records logo over in the bottom right corner, very bare bones back here. On this record, you have Ray Manzarek on keys, Robbie Krieger on guitar, John Densmore on drums, and of course, Mr. Mojo Rising himself, Jim Morrison on vocals. Notable guests include Jerry Sheff on bass, he was Elvis's bassist, and Mark Benno on rhythm guitar, he worked with Leon Russell. We have an outlier in the Doors discography right here. This was produced by Bruce Botnick, who traditionally filled the role of the Doors' audio engineer. On this channel, we stan audio engineers. He's no Glenn Johns, but I suppose he will do. Throwback to literally last week on this channel when I was like, I want to fuck Glenn Johns. So LA Woman was produced by Bruce Botnick because the Doors had a falling out with their longtime producer, Paul Rothchild. And that had to do with the following circumstances. So in 1969, critics and fans finally seemed to be on the same page about the Doors, raving over both The Soft Parade, which I have right here, and Morrison Hotel, which I sadly do not own. Oh my god, I have so many records. I'm struggling to find them. And this was a huge departure from their first two albums, self-titled and Strange Days. But The Soft Parade had not gotten much airplay, and that is because things were getting tricky. Through the Soft Parade album cycle, the Doors had gotten blacklisted from radio. Jim Morrison was becoming increasingly difficult to handle. Ooh, I think I just ripped my tights. Jim Morrison was a provocateur at best and a belligerent drunk at worst. He was consistently not showing up to rehearsals, playing shows drunk. He was arrested for indecent exposure at a Doors gig in Miami, almost went to jail for that. Both the label and the venues were beginning to see the Doors as a liability because of Jim. Though things did ease up for them during the Morrison Hotel album cycle, they were allowed back on radio. But for lack of a better phrasing, the Doors were in trouble. They had the fans and critics on their side, but they weren't getting the radio play that their label was used to. They weren't rehearsing, so the quality of their time in the studio was faltering. You can't be a good band if you don't rehearse, and that is why Paul left. It's also been said that Paul left because of his feelings in the wake of the death of Janis Joplin. She passed at just 27, and Paul had just worked on her final album, Pearl. And honestly, I believe that is a component of why Paul broke off his working relationship with the Doors. I imagine it would be frustrating and really scary to see Jim putting his foot on the gas pedal to get on the highway to speed towards exactly what had happened to Janis. And all of that leads up to LA Woman. This album was recorded in a really short window of time from December 1970 to January of 1971. Just how short was that window? We're getting there. Work started at Sunset Sound, where early versions of the title track and the singles were cut. But this was actually recorded at the Doors' workshop in LA. This was the business building where the Doors did all of their, managerial stuff. Numbers, things I don't understand. Right, so the Doors were having some issues with Elektra Records. They weren't consulted at all through Elektra assembling and releasing their compilation album 13, because what do labels like? That's right, money. And they used a picture of Skinny Jim on the cover. They used a picture of Jim that was 4 years old. And Jim was understandably pissed. He hadn't looked like that in 4 years. The group was so upset that they threatened to leave Elektra. Side note about Fat Jim, I think Jim was just as attractive here as he was here. Clearing that up now. Because the Doors were on the fringes with Elektra over both business reasons and very personal reasons, they didn't have access to the Elektra facilities anymore. And that is why they set up the studio in the basement of the Doors workshop. There definitely wasn't an isolated vocal booth, so Jim was singing into a microphone in the bathroom hallway. And this whole album was start to finish in 6 days. Not only is this the exact opposite of the very, very lengthy process of the Soft Parade, this blows any other album turnover that I've heard of out of the water. To put this in perspective, Are You Experienced and Axis Bold as Love took about 6 months to put together. LA Woman, 6 days. That is the stuff of rock and roll legend right there. And the track listing goes as follows. The album opens with The Changeling, followed by Love Her Madly, Been Down So Long, Cars Hiss By My Window, and the A-side is concluded with the title track, LA Woman. Opening up the B-side, you have L'America, followed by Hyacinth House, Crawling King Snake, which is a blues standard. This was originally recorded by John Lee Hooker, followed by The Wasp, which has the subtitle Texas Radio and Big Beat. And the album closes with the 7-minute epic Riders on the Storm. Right, so LA Woman, cut together start to finish in the last week of 1970/first week of 1971, and it comes out that April. The chosen singles were Love Her Madly and Riders on the Storm, and critical reception was generally positive, ranging from lukewarm to, oh my god, this is a work of genius. This was the last Doors album to feature Jim Morrison. After his death in July of 71, the Doors would continue on making music without him, but some Doors fans, including myself, believe that LA Woman is kind of the last true Doors album. In mentioning the death of Jim Morrison, I am taking a good chunk of the runtime of this video to discuss the myth of Jim Morrison. If I were alive in the 1960s and hanging out with rock stars like you all seem to think I should have been doing, Jim Morrison and I would have hated each other. We would have gotten on each other's nerves. I don't do well with pretentious. I have to be the pretentious one. But I do identify with him. And this is the text that made me identify with Jim Morrison. It's inside of this anthology. This is the Shake It Up anthology. This was my first experience with any music journalism. I really was ignorant to the music world until this class and this book. And this was also my introduction to groupie literature. Before Eve Babbitt was an album artist and a writer, she was, well, of course she was modeling for Marcel Duchamp, but before that, she was a groupie. I'll get into the ins and outs of groupies on this channel in depth at some point. I'm gonna read you a couple of excerpts from Eve Babbitt's Jim Morrison is Dead and Living in Hollywood. Oh, look who that is. This has got to be a few years old. B-roll Abby will totally be showing you this. This was just in here as a bookmark. All right. According to some health statistics I recently heard about, the 50s was the decade when the American diet contained its highest percentage of fat, over 50%. And these 50s children, overfed, repressed, and indignant, waited in the wings, lurking and praying to get big enough to get the fuck out. Jim Morrison had it worse than a lot of kids. He was fat, and his father was a naval officer. Then the ultimate dream of everyone who weighs too much and gets thin happened to Jim. He lost the weight and turned into the prince. Into John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Into Mick. I met Jim early in '66 when he just lost the weight and wore a suit made of gray suede, lashed together at the seams with lanyards and no shirt. It was the best outfit he ever had, and he was so cute that no woman was safe. He was 22, a few months younger than I. He had the freshness and humility of someone who'd been fat all his life and was now suddenly a morning glory. He never really stopped being a fat kid. He used to suggest, let's go to Ships and get blueberry pancakes with blueberry syrup. Jim was embarrassing because he wasn't cool, but I still loved him. It was his mouth, of course, which was so edible, just so long as he didn't smile and reveal his 2 Irish teeth. Just so long as he kept his James Dean smolder, it worked. But it takes a lot of downers to achieve that on a full-time basis, and no fat. Even his voice was embarrassing, sounding so sudden and personal and uttering such hogwash in a time when, if you were going to say words, they were going to be ironic and a little off-center. Jim just blurted things the fuck out. Jim never saw himself as pretty or cool. And that's because he didn't grow up pretty or cool. He grew up James Douglas Morrison, a kid with an author's name, the son of a military guy, as square can get. And he didn't value looks or cool because he knew the looks were temporary. He knew he was gonna get fat again anyway, whether it was eating pancakes or doing drugs or just getting old. And cool is subjective. Cool changes all the time. What mattered to Jim was not everything going on the outside. It was what was up here. Maybe not being a, straight cut good person, but being interesting. But since he died at 27 and was buried in Paris with poets and philosophers, and we've had all this time to mythicize him, we made him this rock god in our minds. Usually rock stars get old and they do all the revisionist history themselves. Jim never got to do that. We did that to Jim. We remembered the person as the persona. And that leads me to the Doors movie. Ugh. Val Kilmer's portrayal of Jim did, like, irreparable harm to his legacy. I'm not even joking with you. He portrayed Jim as the cool kid, and that's where the problem rises for me. He portrayed Jim as, like, the intellectual, brooding, troubled, sexy man who got groupies up the wazoo. And sure, that's how we all saw Jim. He saw himself as the poet. He lived and died as the poet, and he was buried as a poet. Literally, that's how he got into Père Lachaise Cemetery. He was listed as a writer. And despite groupies here and there, Jim was by all accounts a one-woman man. Take the title track of LA Woman. I see your hair is burning, hills are filled with fire. If they say I never loved you, you know they are a liar. That is Jim 100% committing himself to his lady Pamela Corson, despite the enduring show that was their relationship. Anyway, Val Kilmer had been beautiful his whole life up until he portrayed Jim Morrison. He never knew what it was like to be the fat kid. He never knew what it was like to be uncool. Jim Morrison and the Doors is not for the cool kids. Jim is for the kids who stayed at home and read books, not because they wanted to, but because they had no friends and that was all that was around. They became intellectuals by circumstance. Jim Morrison is the front man for nerds. And that's why I eat blueberry pancakes every year on Jim Morrison's birthday. Jim, I may not have liked you, but I do love you. So, going in, I did not pay much attention to LA Woman. My favorite Doors record is, shit, if I can find it. Oh no, oh boy. Ugh, it's Strange Days. Oh my god, I need to get it together. And I still prefer Strange Days to this record. I also prefer Strange Days to this record. Throughout all of LA Woman, this was maybe the most immediate draw for me. We get to see the full breadth of what Jim could do vocally. It starts with this bold but really rough voice, almost like he's singing through a belly of whiskey and junk food. He plays with that on The Changeling, really nails it with Been Down So Long, and it peaks on the title track where he does this. That sounds drunk. Someone cut that man off. But then by the end, with Riders on the Storm, he's singing a little more like he did on here. It's mellower, gentler, smoother, without the gruffness, the grit, but it's still grown up. Of the big songs, my favorite is the title track by a long shot. It paints a perfect picture of the ambiance, what it felt like to be on the Sunset Strip from the late 60s to the early 70s. It was girls with glitter and feathers and scarves and clown blouses. But it's not all fun and games. It's pretty dark on the underside. And that song is Jim bidding his final farewell to the city that made him. I'm just gonna say what everyone is thinking. This track listing is a little weird. Specifically, I take issue with the organization of the A-side. I strongly feel like this album should have opened with the title track. Like, having it open with one 7-minute track and closing with the other? Like, tell me the album shouldn't have opened with this. There are some spots on here that I'm not crazy about. I feel like Cars Hiss By ends right when it's starting to go somewhere, and that frustrates me. That cat wail is the best part of that track, but it makes me so sad because that's how you know it's over. Moments like that kind of make it obvious that a producer did not produce this. But where this album truly shines is the filler. L'America is foreboding, a little heavier. I love when the doors get dark like an acid freakout, and L'America is trippy and dark. The complete opposite of that is Hyacinth House. I may be biased with Hyacinth House because it's one of my favorite Doors songs, and I forgot it was until I revisited LA Woman for this video. The line, "Why did you throw the Jack of Hearts away? It was the only card in the deck I had left to play," is such a gentle expression of defeat. I couldn't help but be touched. And the instrumentation is gentle and delicate without being weak. It fills everything out. I love the keys and I love the guitar tone on that one. And then there's Crawling King Snake. My second listen of this album was on a 3-hour drive, and I was dancing to that in my seat. Dunkin' iced coffee in hand. Hey, you can take the girl out of New England, but you can't take me away from my shitty coffee. Same thing with Wasp. I was vibing to Wasp. My favorite thing about the Doors is that the keys are filling a space in between what the keys would typically be doing and what the lead guitar would typically be doing in any other band. As much as I champion the real Jim, Ray is 100% my favorite member of the Doors. He was the component that made any Doors song unmistakably Doors. Now that I'm talking more, I'm realizing why they dropped the. Riders on the Storm is Ray's crowning achievement. Riders on the Storm is the sum of everything this group would do. In a way, all of the other albums that I'm not going to bother to pick up right now because this is a mess, all of that was leading up to the final 7 minutes of this record. While there are weak spots in the production, moments like Riders on the Storm, where everything is so thoughtfully assembled, they even out all of the weak spots for me. Listen to the far right channel in the middle 3-ish minutes of Riders on the Storm with Ray's solo. Everything going on behind it it's a genius way to fill the negative space. My other favorite thing about the Doors is when Jim reads his poetry over song. That's why I really dig An American Prayer, but when we got to the Wasp, I literally cheered. It's one of my favorite moments for sure. Again, so nerdy to be putting poetry together with music. LA Woman is the Doors at peak uncool. It's prose set to music, the keys doing what a hotshot lead guitarist should be doing, and a fat, washed-up lead singer. And that's why this record works. My personal favorites are The Changeling, Been Down So Long, LA Woman, L'America, Hyacinth House, and Riders on the Storm, and that is the Doors. That is LA Woman. What do you think of 70s Doors? What do you think of, Jim Morrison, the person versus the persona? Anything pertaining to LA Woman, you should leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about the music that I love. And if you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!